The Navy SEAL instructor looked at my sister Celeste and laughed when she asked to try the sniper rifle. What happened next silenced an entire training facility and changed military protocol forever. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Picture the most intimidating place on Earth for a civilian, the Navy SEAL training facility at Coronado Beach, California. Concrete buildings stretch across sandy terrain, obstacle courses snake between structures, and the sound of automatic weapons fire echoes constantly in the background. This is where America's deadliest warriors are forged, where only the most elite soldiers earn their place. Walking through this fortress of military might is my sister Celeste Vance. At 24 years old, she stands barely 5'4" in her simple blue jeans and white button-down shirt, a government contractor badge hanging from a lanyard around her neck. Her dark brown hair is pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carries a metal briefcase containing precision instruments for calibrating sniper rifle systems. She looks completely out of place among the towering Special Forces operators who move past her with casual confidence. These men are walking legends. Each one has survived grueling training that breaks most candidates. Each one has proven themselves in combat situations that would terrify ordinary people. They wear their experience like armor, speaking in military abbreviations, and carrying themselves with the quiet assurance of those who have stared death in the face and walked away. The moment of tension. But here's what none of them know about the quiet contractor walking among them. Hidden beneath that unassuming exterior is a woman who's been shooting since she could barely lift a rifle, trained by a Marine Corps legend who taught her that precision isn't just about pulling a trigger. It's about understanding physics, mathematics, and the deadly art of making impossible shots when everything depends on it. In less than an hour, this same woman who looks so ordinary, so out of place among these warriors, will do something that will leave every Navy SEAL in that facility questioning everything they thought they knew about shooting. She'll prove that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody notices. Building anticipation. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about marksmanship. It's about the moment when prejudice meets precision, when assumptions crash against undeniable skill, and when a single trigger pull changes how an entire military facility views capability and respect. This is the day my sister Celeste stopped being invisible and became legendary. To understand how Celeste ended up in that moment, you need to know where she came from. Our family ranch sits in the rolling hills outside Billings, Montana, where the wind carries the scent of sagebrush, and the nearest neighbor lives 5 miles away. It's the kind of place where self-reliance isn't a philosophy, it's survival. When Celeste was 8 years old and I was heading off to college, our parents died in a car accident during a Montana blizzard. Our grandfather, retired Marine Corps Sergeant Major Bowen Vance, became our guardian. Grandpa Bowen wasn't the cookie-baking, storytelling kind of grandfather. He was a man forged by 3 tours in Vietnam as a Marine sniper, someone who believed that life's hardest lessons were also its most valuable. While other kids her age were playing video games, Celeste was learning to calculate wind drift and bullet drop. A rifle is a precision instrument, Grandpa Bowen would tell her as they walked to the shooting range he'd built behind the barn. It's not about power, it's about understanding. Physics doesn't care if you're 8 or 80, male or female. Mathematics is the great equalizer. By the time she was 12, Celeste could consistently hit targets at 600 yards. By 16, she was competing in precision rifle competitions across the western states, often the youngest competitor by a decade. While I chose the corporate path in Seattle, building a career in finance, Celeste earned her mechanical engineering degree from Montana State and specialized in ballistics and weapons systems design. The contract. 3 years ago, the Department of Defense awarded her company a contract to develop next-generation sniper rifle systems. Celeste had become something rare in the defense industry, a civilian who understood both the theoretical science and practical application of precision shooting. Her technical reports were flawless, her equipment designs revolutionary, but she'd always worked behind the scenes, never directly with active military personnel. That changed when the Navy specifically requested her presence at Coronado. The new rifle systems she'd helped design were experiencing accuracy issues during live-fire testing, and the military wanted answers from the source. For Celeste, this represented the culmination of years of work, seeing her designs in the hands of America's most elite warriors. First impressions. The moment she stepped onto the Coronado facility, Celeste felt the weight of being utterly foreign to this environment. The base buzzed with controlled chaos. Helicopters thundered overhead, trainees shouted cadences during physical training, and the sharp crack of rifle fire provided a constant soundtrack. Everything here served one purpose: creating warriors capable of completing impossible missions. She reported to Building 147, the weapons training facility, carrying her briefcase of calibration equipment and a folder thick with technical specifications. The receptionist, a crisp Navy yeoman, looked her up and down with barely concealed curiosity before directing her to the range complex. Meeting the team. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez commanded the weapons training program with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 20 years turning raw recruits into lethal operators. He was polite during their initial meeting, shaking her hand professionally while his eyes assessed her like she was equipment to be evaluated. "Ma'am, we appreciate the Navy sending their best technical support. We're looking forward to resolving these accuracy issues." Sergeant Kane, the primary weapons instructor, proved less diplomatic. A mountain of a man with forearms like bridge cables and a jaw that looked carved from granite, he'd earned his reputation training some of the most dangerous men on Earth. When Rodriguez introduced Celeste, Kane's handshake was perfunctory, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Another contractor," he said to Rodriguez, not quite under his breath. "Hope this one actually understands what we're dealing with out here." The environment. The weapons training facility felt like stepping into a different world. Banks of precision rifles lined the walls, each one capable of reaching out and touching targets at distances that defied comprehension. Range safety posters covered every surface, reminding everyone that these weren't toys but instruments of national security. The smell of gun oil and cordite hung in the air like incense in a church of lethality. Everywhere Celeste looked, she saw men who'd proven themselves in ways she never could. They moved with the casual confidence of those who'd been tested in combat and emerged victorious. Their conversations were peppered with military jargon and references to operations she'd only read about in classified reports. Internal struggle. As she unpacked her equipment, Celeste fought against the voice in her head questioning whether she belonged here. These men had earned their place through blood, sweat, and sacrifice in ways she'd never experienced. Her expertise came from laboratories and testing ranges, not firefights and rescue missions. Yet Grandpa Bowen's voice cut through her self-doubt. "Celeste, competence doesn't require permission. If you know something, know it completely. If you can do something, do it without apology. The world has enough pretenders, it needs more people who simply deliver results." She thought about all those dawn mornings on the ranch, learning to read wind patterns in the grass, understanding how temperature affected bullet trajectory, mastering the mental discipline required for precision shooting. Every lesson had been preparation for something, though she'd never imagined it would lead here. The setup. As the morning progressed, Celeste observed the training regimen with growing concern. The new rifle systems were indeed performing inconsistently at long range, just as reported. But watching the shooters, listening to their frustrated comments about equipment failure, she began to see patterns that pointed to systematic issues rather than operator error. The stage was set for confrontation between worlds, between the practical experience of combat-tested warriors and the theoretical knowledge of someone who'd never fired a shot in anger, but understood the science of precision better than almost anyone alive. What happened next would challenge every assumption about expertise, capability, and where true knowledge comes from. The morning's live-fire exercise was supposed to be routine. 20 Navy SEALs taking turns with the new precision rifle systems, engaging targets at various distances to validate the equipment's performance. Celeste stood behind the firing line with her tablet, recording data on each shot, tracking performance metrics that would inform her final calibration report. What she saw made her stomach tighten with concern. At 400 and 600 meters, the rifles performed flawlessly. The SEALs were hitting their targets with the deadly accuracy expected of America's elite. But as the range extended to 800 meters and beyond, a disturbing pattern emerged. Shots that should have been dead center were consistently pulling left and dropping low. The variance was subtle but unmistakable to someone trained to see it. She ran the calculations 3 times, cross-referencing environmental conditions, ammunition specifications, and barrel harmonics. The mathematics didn't lie. These rifles had a systematic accuracy problem that would prove fatal in real-world operations, where a miss by 6 inches could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The first approach. During a brief training pause, Celeste approached Sergeant Kane with her findings. He was cleaning one of the rifles with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd maintained weapons in combat zones, his massive hands moving with surprising delicacy around the precision components. "Sergeant Kane," she began, keeping her voice professional and respectful. "I've been analyzing the long-range performance data, and I'm seeing some concerning patterns in the shot groupings beyond 800 meters. Kane looked up from the rifle, his expression neutral but his body language suggesting mild annoyance at the interruption. "What kind of patterns, ma'am?" Celeste showed him her tablet, pointing to the data clusters that revealed the accuracy issues. "The rifles are grouping shots consistently left and low at extended range. Based on the ballistic coefficients and environmental factors, I believe there's an issue with the barrel harmonics that's affecting precision at distance." Kane glanced at the screen for perhaps 3 seconds before returning to his rifle maintenance. "Ma'am, these rifle systems have been tested extensively by our best shooters. We've had world-class snipers put thousands of rounds through these weapons. I think we know what we're dealing with." The technical debate. Celeste felt the dismissal like a physical blow, but she pressed forward. Years of working in male-dominated fields had taught her that backing down at the first sign of resistance meant losing all credibility. "Sergeant, I understand the testing protocols, but the mathematical analysis shows a clear pattern. At 1,000 meters, this variance could result in misses of 6 inches or more." Kane set down the rifle and turned to face her fully, his expression hardening. "Look, contractor, I appreciate that the Navy sent us their technical expert. But shooting isn't about spreadsheets and calculations. It's about skill, training, and experience, things you learn through years of practice and combat situations, not in a classroom or laboratory." Other SEALs had begun to notice the conversation, their training temporarily forgotten as they sensed potential conflict. Celeste could feel their attention shifting to her, could sense their automatic alignment with their instructor against the outsider, questioning their capabilities. The escalation. "The mathematics don't lie, Sergeant," Celeste replied, her voice remaining steady despite the growing audience. "Physics applies the same way in combat as it does in testing. If these rifles have a systematic accuracy issue, it needs to be addressed before they're deployed operationally." Kane's jaw tightened, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're talking to men who have made shots under fire that most people couldn't make on a calm day at a shooting range. We've saved American lives with our marksmanship, and we've lost brothers when equipment failed. We know the difference between theoretical perfection and real-world performance." The circle of SEALs had grown larger, their conversations dying as they focused on the confrontation. Someone in the back muttered, "Civilians always think they know better." Another voice added, "Probably never fired a shot outside a controlled environment." The challenge forms. Kane glanced around at his men, reading their expressions with the intuition of a leader who'd trained them for years. When he spoke again, his voice carried a theatrical quality, playing to his audience while maintaining the pretense of addressing Celeste directly. "Ma'am, I'll tell you what. These boys have been working hard this morning, and they could use a little entertainment. You seem to think you understand precision shooting better than Navy SEALs who have been doing this professionally for years. Maybe you'd like to demonstrate these theoretical skills you're talking about." The suggestion drew immediate interest from the gathered SEALs. Someone called out, "Yeah, let's see some of that classroom marksmanship." Another voice added, "Show us how it's really done, Professor." Kane raised his hand for silence, but his eyes never left Celeste's face. "We could set you up with one of these supposedly flawed rifles, let you show us where we're going wrong. Unless, of course, your expertise is purely theoretical." The moment of truth. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a discharged rifle. Celeste understood immediately that this wasn't really about marksmanship or equipment calibration. This was about respect, territory, and the unspoken hierarchy that governed this world of elite warriors. She was the outsider, the civilian, the woman questioning the competence of men who'd proven themselves in ways she never could. Every instinct told her to find a diplomatic way out, to defer to their experience and maintain professional relationships. But Grandpa Bowen's voice cut through her hesitation. "When someone questions your competence, you have two choices: prove them right or prove them wrong. There's no middle ground in moments like these." She looked around at the faces surrounding her, some curious, some skeptical, some already smirking at what they assumed would be her inevitable embarrassment. These men had no idea that the quiet contractor they were dismissing had been shooting competitively since childhood, that she'd learned marksmanship from a Marine legend, that precision shooting wasn't just her profession but her passion. The silence stretched as everyone waited for her response, unaware that they'd just challenged someone whose entire life had been preparation for this exact moment. Celeste took a breath that seemed to last forever, feeling the weight of every stare, every smirk, every assumption about what she could or couldn't do. In that moment, she made a choice that would either validate years of training or destroy her credibility in front of the military's most elite warriors. "I accept your challenge, Sergeant Kane," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent range. "But I have two conditions. First, I want to use a rifle that I can properly zero myself from scratch. Second, I want to shoot at your maximum range targets." Kane's eyebrows shot up. The facility's longest precision target sat at 1,200 meters, nearly 3/4 of a mile. It was a distance that challenged even the most experienced military snipers, where wind, temperature, humidity, and a dozen other variables could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. "Ma'am, that's a 1,200-meter target," Kane said, his tone suggesting she might not understand the implications. "Our best shooters average 3 hits out of 5 at that distance on a good day." "I understand the distance, Sergeant." Celeste's voice remained steady, but inside, her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't made a shot at 1,200 meters in over a year, and never with this many people watching, never with so much riding on the outcome. "The preparation begins." Kane gestured toward the rifle rack, his expression mixing curiosity with anticipation of her failure. "Pick your weapon, contractor. Boys, let's give our technical expert some room to work." Celeste approached the rifles with the methodical precision that had defined her entire career. While the SEALs expected her to grab the first available weapon, she spent several minutes examining each rifle, checking barrel wear, trigger mechanisms, and scope mountings. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, testing each component with the expertise of someone who'd built similar weapons from the ground up. She selected a rifle that felt balanced in her hands, its weight distribution suggesting consistent manufacturing tolerances. The SEALs watched with growing interest as she began the zeroing process, their casual dismissiveness replaced by professional curiosity about her methodology. The technical mastery. What happened next surprised everyone. Celeste didn't rush to the shooting position like an eager amateur trying to prove herself. Instead, she set up a proper zeroing station, using precision tools from her kit to ensure the rifle was perfectly aligned. She adjusted the scope with micro-measurements, tested the trigger pull with a gauge, and examined the ammunition with the intensity of a scientist conducting an experiment. "She actually knows what she's doing," someone murmured from the crowd. Sergeant Kane moved closer, watching her work with the eye of a professional evaluating another professional. "Where did you learn to prep a rifle like that, ma'am?" My grandfather taught me that equipment preparation is 90% of marksmanship success, Celeste replied, making minute adjustments to the scope turrets. Sergeant Major Bowen Vance, Marines. He used to say that amateurs focus on the trigger pull, but professionals focus on everything that happens before they touch the trigger. The mention of a Marine Corps Sergeant Major shifted something in the atmosphere. These men understood lineage, understood that knowledge passed down from proven warriors carried different weight than textbook theory. The internal struggle. As Celeste worked, her mind battled between confidence and terror. Every technical skill she'd ever learned was being called upon simultaneously. She calculated wind speed using grass movement and mirage patterns, estimated temperature effects on bullet trajectory, and factored in the slight changes in humidity that had occurred since morning. But beneath the technical expertise, doubt whispered insidiously. What if she missed? What if years of training weren't enough when it really mattered? What if she proved every skeptic right and destroyed not just her own credibility, but opened the door for every future woman to face the same dismissive treatment? Grandpa Bowen's voice cut through her fear. Celeste, when the pressure's on, don't think about success or failure. Think about process. Execute each step perfectly and the outcome takes care of itself. Setting up the shot. The crowd had grown as words spread through the facility. Off-duty SEALs emerged from other buildings. Instructors paused their training, and even some of the base personnel gathered to witness what had become an impromptu test of civilian versus military expertise. Celeste chose a prone shooting position, using a bipod and rear sandbag for maximum stability. The concrete shooting bench provided a solid platform, but at 1,200 meters, even the slightest inconsistency would magnify into a complete miss. She settled into position with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this thousands of times, finding her natural point of aim without forcing the rifle to conform to an awkward body position. Her breathing slowed to the deep, measured rhythm that Grandpa Bowen had drilled into her since childhood. The final preparations. Kane took position behind a spotting scope, his job to call out hits and misses for the gathered crowd. Contractor Vance will be engaging the 1,200-meter target with 5 rounds, he announced officially. For reference, this is the same distance our advanced snipers use for final qualification testing. Celeste loaded 5 carefully selected rounds, each one inspected for manufacturing defects that could affect trajectory. The ammunition had been temperature stabilized in her equipment case, ensuring consistent powder burn rates that would translate to consistent muzzle velocities. As she chambered the first round, the facility fell silent except for the distant crash of Pacific waves and the whisper of wind through the training complex. Even the skeptics seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen. The moment of truth. Celeste's eye found the scope, and suddenly the chaos of the crowd, the pressure of the moment, and the weight of expectations faded away. Through the magnified optics, she could see the target clearly, a small black circle that represented everything she'd trained for since childhood. Her breathing settled into the rhythm that had become second nature. In through the nose, hold, release slowly through the mouth, natural respiratory pause. In that moment of absolute stillness between breaths, when her heartbeat slowed and her vision crystallized, Celeste prepared to prove that competence doesn't depend on gender, background, or assumptions. The first shot would either validate everything she believed about precision, preparation, and her own abilities, or it would confirm every doubt that had been whispered about her presence in this elite facility. In that perfect moment between heartbeats, when her breathing stilled, and the world narrowed to nothing but crosshairs and target, Celeste squeezed the trigger with the smooth, straight-back pressure that Grandpa Bowen had drilled into her for 16 years. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the sharp crack echoing across the range like thunder. Through his spotting scope, Kane watched the target for what felt like an eternity. At 1,200 meters, it took nearly 2 seconds for the bullet to reach its destination, 2 seconds that stretched like hours as everyone held their breath. Then the target marker waved, the unmistakable signal of a center hit. Target, Kane called out, his voice carrying a note of surprise he couldn't quite suppress. Dead center. A murmur rippled through the crowd of SEALs. Someone in the back called out, "Lucky shot!" But the conviction behind the words had already begun to waver. Celeste didn't react to the comment, didn't acknowledge the growing attention. She simply worked the bolt with mechanical precision, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering the next round. Building the impossible. 30 seconds later, she fired again. Same breathing pattern, same trigger control, same absolute focus that blocked out everything except the mathematics of precision. The second bullet followed an identical path through space, fighting the same wind currents, defying the same gravitational pull. Kane's voice carried across the range with growing amazement. Target, center hit. The casual chatter stopped completely. 2 perfect shots at 1,200 meters wasn't luck. It was skill operating at a level that most of these elite warriors had never witnessed firsthand. The SEALs who had been standing casually now pressed forward, trying to get a better view of the woman who was systematically dismantling their assumptions about civilian capabilities. Sergeant Kane lowered his spotting scope and looked directly at Celeste, his expression transforming from skepticism to focused professional interest. 2 for 2, ma'am. That's exceptional shooting by any standard. The streak continues. Celeste chambered her third round with the same methodical precision she'd shown since the beginning. Her heart rate remained steady, her breathing controlled, her mind clear of everything except the fundamental principles of marksmanship that had become as natural as walking. The third shot cracked across the range, and once again Kane's voice carried the confirmation. Target, dead center. Now the silence was different, not the skeptical quiet of people waiting for failure, but the awed hush of professionals witnessing mastery. These men had seen exceptional marksmanship in combat zones around the world, but 3 consecutive center hits at 1,200 meters represented shooting that bordered on the impossible. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez pushed through the crowd to stand beside Kane, grabbing a second spotting scope to verify what he was hearing. "I need to see this for myself," he muttered, adjusting the optics to focus on the distant target. The mathematical perfection. Celeste fired her fourth shot with the same mechanical precision that had characterized every round. Through the scope, Rodriguez watched the bullet's impact with the eye of someone who'd been evaluating marksmanship for 2 decades. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, then caught himself. "Target, perfect center hit." 4 shots, 4 perfect hits. The crowd of SEALs had grown to include nearly every available person on the range complex. Word was spreading through the facility like wildfire. The civilian contractor was doing something that defied conventional understanding of human marksmanship capabilities. Kane looked at the data he'd been recording, shaking his head in disbelief. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen shooting like this. 4 consecutive dead center hits at 1,200 meters. Our best snipers would be thrilled with 3 out of 5 at this distance." The final shot. Celeste chambered her 5th and final round, aware now of the absolute silence that had settled over the range. She could feel the weight of every stare, the pressure of expectations that had shifted from hopping for her failure to demanding her continued success. But in the scope, none of that mattered. There was only the target, the crosshairs, and the fundamental physics that governed precision shooting. She settled into her final shot with the same calm deliberation that had carried her through the previous 4. Her breathing slowed, her vision sharpened, and in that moment of perfect stillness, she applied the trigger pressure that would complete one of the most remarkable demonstrations of marksmanship in naval special warfare history. The rifle fired, the bullet traced its arc through nearly 3/4 of a mile of space, and Kane's voice carried across the stunned range. "Target, dead center, 5 for 5. The moment of recognition. The silence that followed was absolute. 47 Navy SEALs, some of the most elite warriors on Earth, stood in complete quiet as they processed what they'd just witnessed. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits at a distance that challenged Olympic-level marksmen. Not just hits, center hits, grouped within a circle smaller than a man's fist at 1,200 meters. Kane slowly stood and removed his cover, a gesture of respect that carried profound meaning in military culture. Ma'am, in 20 years of military service across multiple combat deployments, I have never seen marksmanship of that caliber. I owe you a formal apology. Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression completely transformed from the polite skepticism he'd shown that morning. Contractor Vance, I need to ask, what's your background? That wasn't just good shooting. That was world-class precision that most of our instructors couldn't duplicate. The revelation. Celeste stood and safed the rifle with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the demonstration. When she spoke, her voice carried quiet confidence without arrogance. My grandfather is retired Marine Sergeant Major Bowen Vance. He spent 3 tours in Vietnam as a sniper before becoming a marksmanship instructor. He taught me that precision shooting isn't about natural talent. It's about understanding physics, respecting mathematics, and practicing fundamentals until they become instinctive. She gestured toward the target that still flew the markers of her 5 consecutive hits. The rifle systems are performing exactly as designed, gentlemen. The accuracy issues you've been experiencing stem from inconsistent factory zero settings and variations in ammunition manufacturing tolerances, exactly what my initial data analysis indicated. The transformation in the facility was immediate and complete. The woman they'd dismissed as an overeducated civilian had just delivered a lesson in humility that would be talked about for years to come. The change in atmosphere was so sudden and complete it felt like stepping into an entirely different facility. The same men who had whispered dismissive comments an hour earlier now pressed forward with genuine curiosity, asking technical questions about breathing techniques, trigger control, and environmental calculations. Sergeant Kane, the mountain of skepticism who had orchestrated the challenge, became Celeste's most eager student. Ma'am, that breathing pattern you used, I've never seen anything like it, Kane said, his voice carrying the humility of someone whose worldview had just been fundamentally altered. Could you walk us through the respiratory cycle you employ for long-range precision? What followed was an impromptu masterclass that drew SEALs from across the facility. Celeste found herself explaining the science behind precision marksmanship to men who'd been doing it professionally for years, but had never understood the underlying physics that governed their craft. She drew diagrams on a whiteboard, showing how minute changes in barrel temperature affected bullet trajectory, how atmospheric pressure variations could move point of impact by several inches at extreme range. The ripple effect. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez pulled Celeste aside during a brief break in the informal teaching session. Ma'am, I need to make a phone call to the facility commander. What you've demonstrated here today isn't just exceptional shooting. It's a paradigm shift in how we approach marksmanship training. Within an hour, Commander Harrison arrived at the range, drawn by reports that seemed too extraordinary to believe. A slight man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing, he'd spent 30 years in naval special warfare and had seen every kind of shooting demonstration imaginable. What he witnessed in the next 20 minutes changed his perspective on civilian contractors forever. Celeste repeated her demonstration with clinical precision, this time with the facility's senior leadership watching. 5 more shots, 5 more perfect center hits at 1,200 meters. Commander Harrison stood in silence for several minutes after the last shot, processing what he'd witnessed. Ms. Vance, he said finally, I'm extending your contract indefinitely. We need you to evaluate our entire marksmanship training program and make recommendations for improvement. What you've shown us today suggests we've been operating with fundamental gaps in our understanding. Personal growth and validation. For Celeste, the transformation was equally profound. The quiet contractor who had walked onto the facility that morning feeling like an imposter now stood at the center of respectful attention from some of the most elite warriors on Earth. But more importantly, she'd proven to herself that competence and preparation could overcome any environment, any prejudice, any assumption about who belonged where. That evening, she called Grandpa Bowen from her hotel room in San Diego. His gravelly voice carried across the line with the warmth she'd known since childhood. How'd it go, kiddo? I think you would have been proud, Grandpa. I made some shots that mattered. I'm always proud of you, Celeste. But I suspect today you learned something about yourself that had nothing to do with shooting." He was right. She discovered that years of feeling like an outsider in male-dominated fields had built a reservoir of quiet strength she'd never fully tapped. The challenge hadn't just been about marksmanship. It had been about standing up for her own expertise when everyone expected her to back down. The broader impact. Word of Celeste's demonstration spread through military channels with the speed that only truly extraordinary events achieve. Within a week, she received calls from Army sniper schools, Marine Corps training commands, and FBI tactical teams. Everyone wanted to understand how a civilian contractor had achieved shooting performance that exceeded their best instructors. But the real change happened at the Coronado facility itself. The casual dismissal of civilian expertise disappeared overnight, replaced by genuine collaboration between military operators and technical specialists. Sergeant Kane became one of Celeste's strongest advocates, often telling new contractors, "Don't let appearances fool you. Some of the deadliest people I know don't look dangerous until they prove otherwise." The long-term consequences. 6 months later, the Pentagon invited Celeste to Washington to present her findings to senior military leadership. Her research into precision shooting had evolved into a comprehensive program that improved accuracy scores across multiple branches of service. The woman who'd been mocked for questioning Navy SEAL capabilities now helped train the trainers who prepared America's elite forces. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. Celeste had always been brilliant at her job, but she'd carried herself with the apologetic demeanor of someone who felt she had to justify her presence in every room. That disappeared after Coronado. She walked into meetings with quiet confidence, spoke her mind without prefacing every comment with disclaimers, and demanded the respect her expertise deserved. The lasting lesson. The story became legendary within military training circles, but not just because of the extraordinary shooting. It became a reminder that competence comes in many forms, that assumptions about capability based on appearance or background can blind organizations to valuable resources, and that true professionals recognize expertise regardless of its source. Kane, now retired and working as a civilian marksmanship instructor, keeps a photo from that day on his office wall. It shows Celeste at the shooting position, surrounded by 47 Navy SEALs watching in respectful silence as she prepared for her final shot. Under the photo, he's written a simple caption: "The day we learned that the most dangerous person on the range might be the quietest one." The universal truth. Celeste's story resonates far beyond military training facilities because it represents a fundamental truth about human potential. In a world that often judges capability by appearance, background, or first impressions, her demonstration reminds us that expertise earned through dedication and preparation speaks louder than any assumption. The quiet contractor who looked so out of place among elite warriors had actually been the most prepared person on that range. Years of training, mathematical precision, and unwavering dedication to craft had created capabilities that surpassed even the military's best. Her success wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving that competence, wherever it develops, deserves recognition and respect. Today, when young women enter male-dominated fields feeling uncertain about their place, many have heard some version of Celeste's story. It reminds them that belonging isn't about fitting in. It's about being so undeniably good at what you do that credentials speak for themselves.